Hypnosis works, transforming the mind.
Hi there, I'm Hendrik Baird, a practicing non-medical hypnotherapist currently based in Pretoria, South Africa. I'm always curious to learn more about hypnosis, and so I thought, what better way to learn than to chat with other hypnotherapists to gain some insights into what they do and how they work. So join me as we explore the fascinating world of the mind and of hypnosis. My guest today is Cape Town-based hypnotherapist Belinda Roxburgh. Belinda Roxburgh joining me this morning here from, you're in Cape Town, aren't you, Belinda?
Yes, I'm in Cape Town. Morning, yes, Cape Town.
Well, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about your history of hypnotherapy. I understand that you qualified in 2017 and have been seeing clients since then. Tell me a little bit about your training and how you started the business.
So when I left school, I actually studied psychology, and because I had this self-limiting belief that I would never get into Onderstepoort to become a vet. And while I was doing my BA in psychology, I realized that this was crazy. So I then applied to Onderstepoort, did get accepted, and became a vet, which I loved for many years. And over the years, I realized I was much more interested in the client rather than the pet. And so my interest in psychology was reinstated. And I then found this course here in Cape Town to study hypnotherapy, which I did over a couple of years. And it has literally changed my life, the studying of hypnotherapy. And during the course, having the opportunity to practice everything we learned on each other, I discovered so much more about myself, and so many issues that I thought, well, it's just the way I am, have changed within a space of a few years. I feel like a different person. So it's been a very exciting time, and then starting to use this obviously with my clients and seeing how their lives change over time. So it's been a fantastic discovery. But yes, I've always been fascinated with hypnosis, and as a younger person going to all the hypnosis shows, not that hypnotherapy is in any way sort of related to that. Well, it is related because you're using parts of your brain that you don't normally use. So it's a very exciting field.
So it's interesting that you say, through the training, you developed yourself in a way, because I found that to be true for myself. I mean, I went there, first of all, to learn something, obviously a new skill, but in the process found that I changed and I grew as a person. How did that manifest for you?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's such an amazing thing to do just for personal growth. For me, the biggest benefit was, it's just a general improvement in self-confidence and self-esteem. The main thing that happened to me during the course was I stopped drinking alcohol. So I realized since then what a fantastic thing it is to do for actually any addiction. It's such a good way of really getting into the subconscious and changing our beliefs. So for me personally, realizing how it's such a normal thing that even though I wouldn't have described myself as a terrible alcoholic, which is such an awful term anyway, but I think there's such a gray area of people that drink every day and how it affects their lives without them being aware of it. And I used this in one of the exercises that we did because I'm not a smoker. So it was actually using all the techniques we used for stop smoking. I used this as my exercise, and I lost my desire to drink alcohol, which was absolutely magical. So I've subsequently did a course without wine, and I now do quite a bit of work for them. And it's an organization that really explores this whole thing of changing our belief systems around around alcohol. So, for example, we learned that we've been basically programmed and brainwashed since we were babies to accept alcohol as a normal thing, a normal part of everyday life, every celebration, every event that you go to. People are sipping and clinking glasses together. Every time you turn on the TV, people are clinking glasses together. And we literally grow up believing that we need a drink to relax and we need a drink to celebrate and to have fun and that kind of thing. And it's actually when you really go into it and see how it affects people's lives and how students, for example, I think that's where it really starts as children become teenagers and start drinking. And that sort of sets their pattern for their lives. Using the theory of hypnosis and the subconscious and really getting in there, one can change that relatively easily, in my opinion. So just changing your belief system about alcohol and realizing how you've been kind of brainwashed and into being a sheep, even just changing that small belief can make an enormous impact. But it obviously goes a lot deeper than that.
You're talking about growing up with alcohol. I grew up in the 60s and alcohol was such a normal part of our lives. I mean, my grandparents and my parents used to order boxes of wine from the Cape and we would always get a bottle of baby champers, which would be mine. And I grew up drinking alcohol and I'm not really a drinker these days, not actually throughout my whole life. But South Africans seem to have a drinking problem. If you look at what's happening with COVID and our lockdowns and alcohol not being available and now people queue for when the bottle stores open again. Do you think we have a general drinking culture that's problematic in this country?
I think it is quite a problem in our country, but I think all over the world, I think people have no idea of what they're doing to themselves and how addictive it is. So this lockdown has been quite an eye-opener for many people, I think, when they suddenly realize that they're actually addicts. And it is such an addictive substance. It's way more addictive than many, many other drugs and has the biggest harm in the communities than any other drug as well. I don't think any one of us knows a family that doesn't have a real alcoholic as a member of the family. So it really has a devastating effect. And what we've noticed recently in the last few years is how the advertising seems to target women in particular. So we kind of get also, again, brainwashed into believing that we can't be mothers without reaching for that glass of wine at the end of the day to cope with our children, etc., etc. But the reality is that drinking alcohol actually fuels anxiety, it fuels depression. And so you think you're having a glass of wine to relieve your stress, but when you really go into it, you realize that it has the opposite effect. It may have a 20-minute relaxation effect, but yeah, since I've stopped drinking, it's been amazing for me to discover how stable my moods are and how less irritable I am. And I feel like a different mother, for example. I never shout at my children. I'm so patient. And I realized if I look back at how this drinking wine every night, which I thought was my lifesaver, was actually doing a lot of harm. It's fantastic for me to know now that I'm setting a good example for my children. So they're going to grow up, having just the consciousness about alcohol. I think that is the key thing. People do it mindlessly. They just do it because everybody else is doing it. They don't take the consciousness and the awareness around, do I really need this drink? Do I want to drink? Is this what I want with my life? And that's part of the whole hypnotherapy process with whatever condition we look at, is increasing people's awareness of their behavior and showing them that they actually have a choice. And the first step, how we behave, how we think, what thoughts we allow ourselves to think and which thoughts we follow. So, if you're addicted to negative thinking, it's quite easy to change that as soon as you become aware of your thoughts and how they take you down into a deep, dark hole. If you can take a pause, watch those thoughts and choose to think other thoughts, and choosing to think other more pleasant thoughts actually affects your physiology, which then also makes you realize how important the mind-body connection is, which we all know. stress being the biggest killer, I think, of people.
I can't tell you how many times I've had a client in the chair that's come to me with grave issues. And when you start exploring and going back into the history, it comes out, my father drank or my mother drank, and how alcohol as a child, from a parent's side has a huge effect on our well-being as we grow up and mature later through life.
Absolutely. I agree. I think 90% of the clients that I've seen have had exactly the same issues with either alcoholic parent that is absent or abusive. So it's and these things are not spoken about, unfortunately are not spoken about in schools. I think it would be fantastic if we could open this conversation in the school situation.
Because also, if you go to an event and you don't drink, or if you don't eat meat for that matter, people will come down on you like you're the worst of the worst. Why don't you drink? You should have a drink. You should have some meat, People try to force these things on us, and that's problematic for me. It's like peer pressure.
Well, it is absolutely like that. And even into adulthood, it's even worse like that. So you can imagine as a teenager how this starts. On this workshop that I did with the World Without Wine, they talk about all these things, and it's amazing how just giving people the tools to say no, even that, and reframing it in a way. Do you want to be a sheep, or would you like to be a rebel? Be a rebel and stay sober. And I love going out to a place and, when people offer me a drink and I say, no, thanks, I don't drink. And the shock on their faces, it's quite amazing, but it's scary to see how people just accept it. People really just accept it without thinking. And I've also been amazed at how just by me not drinking, how many people in my circle have actually either cut down drastically or also stop drinking when they realize all the benefits. And that, coming back to addictions, when we concentrate on the benefits of that different path, because it is literally a different neural path that you start to develop in your brain, when we focus on all the benefits, it just becomes easy. So it's not a difficult thing to change a habit when you do it in a logical way using that powerful subconscious brain that we have. So by changing our subconscious beliefs about alcohol or any other addiction and really focusing on the benefits of how our life will be and is when we stop, it becomes so easy to stop. It becomes automatic. And willpower becomes very, very unimportant in the process. So it's quite a magical process to go through.
Now, when you go to something like the AA and you do the 12-step program, I've seen it in movies so many times. People stand up and saying, "Hi, my name is Hendrik and I'm an alcoholic." Do you think that is the right way to go? Because it seems to me like you are claiming the negative and you are always an alcoholic, even if you stop drinking and it's 10 years later. Like you will always be an alcoholic, you will never be able to change, and you're just one step away from going back into the gutter. Do you believe in that sort of approach, or do you approach it?
I think we're all different. Personally, I think it's a terrible way of approaching it, but it's obviously worked for many people. I think it's quite a disempowering approach, and that's, again, back to hypnosis. I think one of the best things of what we do is we don't label people in any which way. And just that you would say you're a person who's got a fondness for alcohol, but that doesn't make you an alcoholic. It makes you somebody who has an addiction problem, but it's something that can easily be changed. And I see it all the time, how when people stop drinking and they feel so empowered, and they don't call themselves in recovery or a recovered alcoholic. They just call themselves a not drinker. They've gone back to normal, actually. They've just gone back to being a normal person. And the scary thing is with alcohol in particular, it takes actually over a year for the dopamine reward cycle in your brain to normalize. And that is something that is, I don't think people know about that. So that's the other problem with something like alcohol, that as soon as you start drinking alcohol and you're getting this hit of dopamine, you eventually need it just to get back to the normal dopamine level. So in other words, the next day your dopamine levels are lower than they normally were. And so it goes on. And after a while, you get that dopamine hit without even having the sip of alcohol. So you already, I can't remember the name of the hormone that actually lowers your dopamine. So because your body's always trying to get into balance. So if your dopamine's spiking, then the body produces something to bring the dopamine down. So when you go into the biology of what happens, well, the physiology of what happens, it's so clear to see how addictive this thing is and how it can be difficult to stop, but it doesn't have to be. As long as you're aware of the different stages that you'll go through. I like to even talk about it as going through the stages of grief because, we use alcohol from such a young age as it almost becomes like a best friend or an abusive lover if you have a problem with it. And giving it up can be quite, you go through all those stages, starting with denial and all the way through to acceptance. But in the middle there, one does have a real dip, and many people experience almost a depression after a couple of months of not drinking. And that is the dopamine cycle trying to normalize, which does happen eventually, one just needs to hang in there and fill the time that you would normally fill with drinking with other more pleasurable things. That's the biggest discovery of stopping drinking in the evenings is this creation of time. So there's so much time to do so many other more worthwhile things. And going to bed with a clear head and waking up with energy and a clear head again, it's amazing.
So tell me, if a client were to come to you and say, listen, I don't want to drink anymore, I think I have a problem. Explain to me how many sessions they would need and what sort of processes you would use to help them.
I always explain to people that it really is such an individual thing because we're all so different. I think it also depends on what stage the person is in the whole process. So some people are really ready to stop and they will really need just 2 or 3 sessions. Other people still need to be convinced that they have a problem, so they're experiencing what we call this cognitive dissonance, where they consciously know perhaps that alcohol is not good for them, but subconsciously they still have an array of beliefs that don't agree with that, so they think they need alcohol to relax and have fun and de-stress, etc., etc. But so the first session is obviously it's quite an education process, and also finding out, when they started drinking, how young they were when they started drinking, because that plays it's quite significant. I think if a person starts drinking before they're 18 or something like that, they're 4 times more likely to become alcohol addicts. So just finding out their family history and all the way up to the present, what triggers them to drink, all that sort of thing takes some time. So the first session is often a lot of information gathering for the following sessions. And we always do some hypnosis, mainly that the person can be relaxed with the hypnosis and discover that they can actually get into a really, really good trance feeling without a drug. So we all have this amazing ability. I mean, we have our own inbuilt pharmacy, so we can actually create all these feel-good feelings without any pharmaceutical intervention. So the first session is really about that, connecting them with a feel-good feeling and an education process. From that session, I would get a good sense of whether they need to deal with all their childhood issues or if the alcohol drinking is simply a habit, which it often is. Some people just, as they go through life, they start to realize they actually got into this really bad habit. And as we get older, it starts to really take its toll physically. So we really just get a sense of which direction they need to go. But I would say that most people would need between 3 and 6 sessions, depending on where they are at. And some people, I think they really would benefit coming more often, say once a month for the next 6 months to a year, until they totally are okay with this thing. But as I say, I think if the person is at a particular stage and they're ready to stop, it can be as quick as 2 or 3 sessions, and that's that. The amazing thing with hypnotherapy is it really is about re-educating the person of how their brain works and empowering them to take the process further. So I always teach them breathing exercises. I teach them self-hypnosis. I teach them how to speak to themselves. The voices that we use on ourselves are such powerful things, and people don't realize that.
In my experience, when I've worked with people who've come to me with alcohol problems, they usually come a little bit hungover. And then when you take them into hypnosis in the first session, they just seem to pass out and sleep. Do you find that? Or do you ask your clients to come sober?
I think, it's a good question. I think I haven't had that problem where they've actually fallen asleep. I did have one person who came, she'd already had a glass or two of wine, and she assured me that she was absolutely fine to do the hypnosis, and unbelievably, it worked very well with her. But yeah, if they're hungover, sometimes it can actually, depending which session you're at, it can be a bad thing. Yeah, and it can also play in your favor. You can highlight the fact that they're feeling so awful. But no, it's no good if they're going to be so hungover that they pass out. I know when in our training we were told in that situation they need to not have a drink for at least 2 or 3 days before they come. And I suppose I've been fortunate enough, the people that I've worked with have mostly been so motivated that they would have already tried, for example, the dry January or the sober spring. This is the World Without Wine. What they do, they have all these challenges that are ongoing all the time. They often advertise on the radio. They put you on a WhatsApp group, so you've got that group support, and then every day they send you an email giving you an indication of what you're doing to your body, how it's benefiting just from even this day of no alcohol. So every day you get this email that helps to change your belief system. It helps to encourage you and give you motivation and reward you for that day of not having any alcohol. So I think it's quite a valuable thing for people who have an addiction to be part of a community or a group in some way, and then use that together with something like hypnotherapy. I think it's a fantastic way of approaching it. So most of the people I've seen have come from that organization. So it's been quite a good thing in that they've already opened their minds to changing their belief systems and also given attention to, filling their lives with other things. So they're already sort of primed for the hypnotherapy. Although when I did the hypnotherapy for stopping wine, I had never even heard of this organization. So, and with me, I suppose because I'd stopped and started so many times, the hypnosis really, again, I was sort of primed to change.
Do you use aversion therapy, saying like if you ever smell some wine, you'll go violently ill and run away, or, things like that? Or do you avoid that sort of approach?
No, I don't use that. But I do, in the one session, I do take them down the path into the future if they had to revert back to drinking 2 bottles of wine a night, how their lives are going to be in 5 years' time and when they even further down the road. So I take them to their own sort of version of that it is like an aversion therapy, but I'm just using what they've given me. So for example, if a person is terrified of getting dementia or losing all their money because of alcohol or losing their family, then you'll take them to the peak of that, where their health is at the absolute worst and their family hates them and they're living in the gutter. But we use everything that they have given to us in the pre-talk. So I'm not giving any suggestions that they haven't already come up with. This is the amazing thing of the subconscious, and this process is letting them experience it at a deep, deep subconscious level, using their imagination, imagining the worst possible scenario. And this is one way of getting the conscious and the subconscious on the same page. In other words, solving that problem of the cognitive dissonance. So once everything is in alignment, they come out of it and everything feels clear. So we don't only take them down that terrible road of despair, we also then bring them back and take them down the other road where they're choosing an alcohol-free life and experiencing all the benefits. And then they need to come up with how it's going to benefit their lives, their relationships. They're going to save money. They're going to be healthier. They're going to lose weight. They're going to eat better and exercise more. So they need to come up with all of that, and taking it further, then they need to choose which path. they're going to go down. And also, which would be covered in this particular session, is all the triggers. So the things that would normally trigger them to drink. So for example, with me, it was at the end of the day, making supper and having children, hungry children, getting irritable and fighting with each other. As soon as my children would start fighting, I would reach for the wine. I can remember even saying to them, which I feel awful about now, that you're driving me to drink. That was my belief, that I sort of gave them all the power. And, I believed that. I believed that I needed a drink to cope. And it's so ironic that since I stopped drinking, I cope a million times better with everything. And in that same session, we would have an opportunity for the client to find other things to do when they feel like a drink. So rather drink an alcohol-free beer or an alcohol-free juice, or go for a run or walk the dog or go to yoga or whatever. So in every situation, they need to come up with a solution. And even in trance, practicing going to a dinner party and saying, no, thanks, I don't drink, or no, thanks, I'm going to drink soda water tonight or whatever. So in that trance state, you get that opportunity to practice those behaviors, which opens the neural pathways, haven't been used for a long time. Yeah, so one of the things, if a person is drinking 2-3 bottles a night, every single night, that's obviously going to be a little bit more challenging than a person that only drinks on weekends or every few days or whatever. So it's all a process, and just unlocking the possibility that one can have a fantastic life without alcohol is the first step. I didn't believe it. So experiencing that for myself has been incredible. So it's been nearly 3 years now since I haven't had a drink.
Every hypnotherapist I've spoken to so far, and I've spoken to a few, it seems to specialize in something, and it seems to me this is your specialization. Do you do other types of hypnosis, or do you solve other types of problems, or is it mainly the alcohol that comes to you?
I think I've done a lot of work with addiction, and I think that everyone who comes to me has an addiction of some sort, whether it's sugar or food, or as a negative thinking, I think is a big one. But I've had a variety of people with different issues, from anxiety and sleep disorders. I think sleep is a big thing. And getting back to the wine, I think that's one of the things that is affected dramatically is sleep. So once a person stops drinking alcohol, the first thing they notice is that they start sleeping through the night, or their sleep quality is improved to such an incredible degree that even that changes their lives. If you're getting a good sleep, even if it's not a long sleep, it really has an enormous impact on one's emotions. So I do see people with sleep problems, anxiety problems, self-esteem. I've had a few people recently with a problematic emotion. For example, the one had a nightmare of a neighbor. I think he called her the neighbor from hell, that was making his life a misery. So the hypnotherapy worked fantastically with that. And then, people with problems with their daughter-in-law or things like that. So just changing a negative emotion and realizing that it's only, we can only change ourselves. And when we take responsibility for our own being and realize that we can't change how other people are, it's quite a liberating thing. Very empowering to realize that you have a choice how to respond. And by training the response that you would prefer in a trance makes it so much easier just to come naturally.
Okay, so can we talk a little bit about the business of hypnotherapy? You were saying earlier that a lot of clients come to you through this organization, World Without Wine. How do you advertise? Where do you advertise? How do you get clients?
I haven't actually needed to advertise. It seems like people come from word of mouth, or they find my website on the internet. I have had quite a number of referrals from the World Without Wine, which is why this has taken off there. I've written some blogs for them, so that's how the interest got generated there. But it just seems people who are becoming more and more open to hypnotherapy and finding out more of all the different applications. which is quite encouraging. I think just changing people's perception of what it's all about. So I often tell people it really is like doing therapy just with your eyes closed in a very deep, relaxed state. It's so much easier to get to the problem in a short space of time and just reframe the issue and come out of it and see life in a different way. So yeah, as far as the business of it goes, I've got lots of ideas of what and how, but up to now I haven't had to promote myself. And I think at this time with COVID, I think mental health is going to become more and more of an issue.
In fact, somebody I spoke to recently did say that his whole focus, it was Max Can, in fact, he said his whole focus of his practice had changed. Previously, he'd seen a lot of smokers, and now suddenly it's all anxiety and depression and all these sort of things because of COVID. Are you seeing the same thing?
Exactly. I think it's very valid. And one area I would love to get into, but I haven't had that much opportunity, is to work with teenage anxiety problems. I think there's such an epidemic of anxiety in young people. And I think it would be fantastic to be able to give them the tools and the belief system that they can take control of their lives and their anxiety and how to cope with that. I think hypnosis would be a fantastic thing to use for that. Up until now, the few teenagers that I've seen, it's quite sometimes a problem with the parents if you start to realize that the parents are the ones that are driving the anxiety. So, and I think that's been for me personally, one of the biggest benefits of the course that I did was also just becoming so acutely aware of how people speak to their children and behave with their children, and how the children just take on all the parents' anxieties and issues. So we need to be so mindful. I think this mindfulness is a big thing.
You were saying earlier also that, people are accepting hypnosis more as a sort of valid method to solve problems. In my experience, people always come to me and saying, look, I'm desperate. I've tried everything else and you're my last hope. Is that something that you see in your practice?
Yes, I think that is valid. I think we do experience that, and hopefully that's going to change, because I think if I look back on my life, I wish I'd done hypnotherapy right from the beginning. As a teenager, I think it would have been fantastic. This podcast that you're doing is wonderful, because spreading the information and getting people to understand what it's all about is part of the journey. The other thing that I really enjoy with the hypnotherapy is how one can use the different spiritual beliefs of the different clients. So it's a fantastic way of deepening people's access to their spiritual resources. It's a wonderful thing to be able to use, regardless of what I believe or don't believe. If you can work with a person that they can get comfort and guidance from whatever it is that they believe in, it's quite an amazing thing to observe, and then also knowing that they can use that going forwards. So it's a really empowering process.
So before we get to your contact details and how people can get hold of you, tell me, World Without Wine, how does one get into contact with that organization?
That is the name of their website. So if you just Google that, you'll get onto the website, and there's a number of resources on there, including lots of blogs and stories. They've got a link to a page, something called Goodbye to Letters. So that's part of the process. A person would write a letter to alcohol saying goodbye and, I'm done with you, and all the reasons and how their lives are better. So that's also freely accessible. If you just type in Goodbye to Letters, I think it will come up. But the World Without Wine is there's so much. Just if you look on their website, if you become a member, then you have access to so many more things. For example, a doctor who can help you with withdrawal symptoms, and they give life coaching and all kinds of things like that. I also offer a complimentary hypnosis session for people that become a member or do the workshop. So it's a very, very worthwhile organization. It's quite different to AA. Not that I've been to AA, but it's much more in line with what we do as hypnotherapists. and I would say a client-centered type of approach. So it's really a worthwhile place to have a look if you want any information or support, help. Yeah.
And you are based in Cape Town. Which area of Cape Town are
Yes,
you in?
I'm in Pinelands, and my website is called Riverside Hypnosis. So again, just if you type that in, you'll find the website there, and I'm on Instagram and Facebook as well, which I need to update a little bit. But it's all there. All my contact details and quite a bit of information and some blogs are there.
And then tell me, obviously these days, people don't want to go and see somebody in person. Maybe they're scared of the COVID. Do you also do online sessions, or is it only in person?
Yes, I am doing quite a lot of online sessions, and I'm finding it works actually very well. I was quite resistant in the beginning, but it actually works very well. And I find that people, well, first of all, they're saving time from driving in and out. And so I've been seeing people actually all over South Africa, and some even from overseas, which I was quite surprised about. People that are, for example, in Germany and the Netherlands, who are doing this World Without Wine, the workshop that they do, because they've also started doing it online as a Zoom online workshop. And I think that what I've seen is I think people are so much more relaxed in their own homes. So I feel that they seem to go into trance even quicker than they do when they're sitting here in the chair. So that's been quite an interesting thing to observe. But I still prefer seeing a person face to face, but I'm very comfortable doing them online as well, if that's what they prefer to do.
Okay. And to end off with, as we said earlier, people sometimes are resistant to use hypnosis and would go to the other modalities first. If you were to give somebody a motivation why they should try hypnosis first before they do the others, what would that be?
I would say that you've got absolutely nothing to lose by doing it. And the worst that can happen is you can have a really good, relaxed session and learn something about how your brain works. I personally believe that hypnosis can be used for anything and everything, even if you do end up needing other support from a doctor or whatever. I think learning hypnosis and experiencing it is going to help whatever other health modality you use. So I think it's a fantastic thing for anyone to do for any reason at all. And especially to relax. Actually, I think it's one of the biggest applications, to relax. And we know that to relax is the best antidote to stress. If you think how stress causes so many diseases, if you can go the opposite way and really engage your relaxed responses of your parasympathetic nervous system, and know that the chemicals that are produced by relaxing deeply, the healing benefit of that is phenomenal. And if you can learn to do that on your own, that is first prize. Yeah.
It has been so insightful chatting with you, Belinda. Thank you so very much for joining me today.
Pleasure. Thank you so much, Hendrik.
Well, I found chatting to my hypnosis colleague very interesting and insightful, and I trust that you did too. Their contact details are in the podcast description, or you can get in touch with them through findahypnotist.co.za. If you want to find out more about me and what I do, please visit my website, hendrikbaird.com. Remember, I release new episodes every Thursday, so be sure to subscribe to my channel. Until we speak again, have a hypnotic day.
Hypnosis works, transforming the mind.